Alex had always considered himself a pretty normal guy. He had a steady job, a small but cozy apartment, and a group of close friends. His life was predictable, comfortable, and in some ways, boring. But everything changed when he became roommates with Zira, an alien from the planet Talana. Zira had arrived on Earth a few months ago as part of an intergalactic research program. She wasn't the first alien to land on Earth. Earth had long been in contact with several alien species, but Zira's mission was different. She was studying human biology, emotions, and behavior. She had spent the last few years on Earth studying from afar, but the research program now required her to live with a human for more direct interaction. Zira was a humanoid, tall with purple skin, silver hair, and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. She looked alien enough to be noticeable, but she was incredibly intelligent and had adapted to human culture fairly quickly. She was calm, logical, and completely professional, qualities that made her a great researcher, but not exactly someone who would throw a party or make a bunch of friends. It had been a couple of months since Alex and Zira had become roommates. At first, things were a little awkward. Alex had never shared his space with an alien, and Zira had her own way of doing things that didn't always align with human habits. Still, over time, they had become comfortable with each other. They shared meals, discussed science fiction movies, and even debated human history. In fact, Alex had grown used to her clinical approach to life, even if it occasionally made their conversations feel like they were in a laboratory instead of a living room. Then, one evening, everything changed. It was a quiet night, the kind where the city outside the window was bustling with life, but inside the apartment, everything was calm. Alex had just finished eating dinner when Zira turned to him with a serious look in her glowing eyes. "Alex," she said, her voice as calm as ever, "I need to ask you for a favor." Alex looked up from his plate, wondering what she could possibly need. "Sure, what's up?" "I've been assigned a new aspect of my research. It involves understanding the human biological process of mating," she said, her tone still clinical. "I need to conduct a practical study to complete my research, and I would like you to assist me." Alex blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. What do you mean, assist you?" he asked, his voice shaky with uncertainty. "I need to experience human breeding firsthand," Zira said, her words falling flat without any obvious embarrassment. "It is an essential part of my study on human biology, and you are my designated research partner." Alex stared at her, his mind trying to process what she had just said. Did she really just ask him to help her with something so personal? He felt his face turn red, and his mouth went dry. "Wait, you want me to?" Zira nodded, still calm. "Yes, I need to understand the emotional and physical aspects of human reproduction. I've studied it extensively, but the only way to truly comprehend it is through experience. My species is not emotionally involved in the process, so I will be approaching this purely from a scientific standpoint. You, however, are an ideal candidate." Alex's mind raced. Was this really happening? He had always known that living with an alien could lead to strange situations, but he hadn't expected this. This wasn't just about helping her with her studies. It was personal. It was something completely foreign to him, something he didn't even know how to begin wrapping his head around. "Zira, this is a lot," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't know if I can." "You do not need to be emotionally involved," Zira interjected. "I only need your cooperation to complete my research. I assure you that no emotional attachment will be required." Alex sat back, still processing everything. He had no idea what was going on, or if this was even something he was comfortable with. But he knew one thing: his life had just become a whole lot more complicated. Alex paced back and forth in his room, his mind racing. The conversation with Zira replayed over and over in his head. She had asked him to help with her research, to participate in something completely outside of his comfort zone. He had never expected his life to take such a strange turn, especially not after moving in with an alien. He sat on his bed, trying to sort through his thoughts. On one hand, he understood that Zira's request was purely scientific. She wasn't asking for anything emotional. But on the other hand, the idea of participating in something so personal, with someone he considered his roommate, was hard to ignore. How could this not be awkward? How could he not be affected by it? After what felt like hours of pacing, Alex finally decided to talk to her. He couldn't keep avoiding the situation. He needed answers, and more than anything, he needed clarity. He knocked on her door, his heart pounding in his chest. "Zira," he called out. The door opened almost immediately, and Zira stood in front of him, looking as calm and collected as always. "Yes, Alex," she asked, her voice neutral. I need to talk," Alex said, feeling a little out of breath. "About what you asked me earlier." Zira nodded and stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. "Of course. Please, sit down. We can discuss this." Alex hesitated but eventually sat down on the couch. Zira sat across from him, her posture perfect as always. "I understand that what I'm asking is unusual," she said, her voice steady. "But I assure you, it is vital for my research. Human biology is complex, and my species has never experienced it firsthand. Your participation would help me gain the knowledge needed to complete my mission." Alex rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of it all. "I get it. I really do. But this is more than just a study, Zira. We're talking about something personal. And I don't know if I can just look at it like an experiment." Zira tilted her head slightly, processing his words. "I understand your hesitation. It is not common for a human to be asked to help with something so intimate. But my species is not the same as yours. Our understanding of relationships is different. We do not experience emotions the same way you do. For us, this is purely about data and understanding biology. There is no attachment required." Alex took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "But I'm still a person. I'm not just a test subject. This isn't something I can just turn off in my head, you know." Zira's eyes softened, and for the first time, Alex noticed a flicker of something resembling understanding in her gaze. "I did not intend to make you uncomfortable," she said quietly. "I did not realize the emotional complexities involved in human biology. I was wrong to assume you would be unaffected." Alex was quiet for a moment. He had always known that Zira was different, but he hadn't realized how much her species' lack of emotional understanding could impact their interactions. "I'm not saying I can't help you, Zira. I just need to be clear about this. I don't want things to get complicated between us." Zira nodded, her expression serious. "I agree. I do not want this to affect our living arrangement or our friendship. If you are not comfortable with this, I will respect your decision. My research is important, but it is not worth losing our friendship over." Alex exhaled slowly, feeling a little relieved. "All right. I just need to know we're on the same page. If I agree to help you with this, it's strictly professional. No emotions, just biology." Zira smiled, though her smile was soft and sincere. "That is all I ask. You will not be required to form any emotional attachment to me. We can both remain focused on the purpose of the study." Alex leaned back against the couch, still processing everything. He was nervous, but something about Zira's sincerity made him believe she wasn't trying to manipulate him. Maybe this wasn't as crazy as he thought. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll help you. But we need to make sure we keep things clear. No crossing boundaries, just research." Zira nodded. "Agreed. Thank you, Alex. This will help both of us." As he left her room, Alex still felt uneasy, but he couldn't deny that a part of him was curious. He was about to embark on something completely new and strange, and despite the uncertainty, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he hadn't expected. The next few days passed in a blur of awkward tension. Alex couldn't stop thinking about what he had agreed to with Zira. The idea of helping with her research still felt strange, but he couldn't back out now. It was a commitment, and he had promised to keep things professional. Zira, on the other hand, seemed calmer now. She had kept her distance for a few days, giving Alex space to process everything. But she was still as clinical as ever, focusing on the details of her research and explaining more about what she needed. She was clear, calm, and precise, traits that made it easier to think of this whole situation as a scientific experiment rather than anything personal. One evening, Zira approached Alex again after dinner. She looked at him with the same serious expression she always wore, but there was something different in her eyes. She was preparing for the next step. "Alex," she began, her voice steady, "I believe it is time to begin the first part of the study. We can start by understanding the human emotional response to this process. I need you to help me gauge what I might experience." Alex swallowed nervously. "Okay, I guess this is the part where things get real." Zira nodded. "Yes, I want to make sure we are both ready before we proceed further. I will need your full cooperation, but I promise that we will respect each other's boundaries." Easier said than done, Alex thought. He couldn't help but wonder how much respecting boundaries would be possible when things started to get personal. But he had already agreed, so there was no turning back now. They moved to the living room, where Zira had set up a small table with various documents, charts, and recording devices. It felt like they were preparing for a lab experiment rather than something so intimate. She had explained that she would document every response, every feeling, and every physical change as part of her research. "I'll be recording everything from now on," she said, her voice as calm as ever, "for your safety and for the accuracy of my findings." Alex nodded, feeling strangely detached as he sat down. He had to remind himself that this was scientific, nothing more. As Zira moved around the room, adjusting the equipment, Alex tried to focus on the task at hand. But as she got closer to him, he noticed how her presence affected him more than he expected. Her glowing eyes, her tall frame, and the fact that she was so calm and confident in such a strange situation. Everything about her seemed to draw him in. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous, but also strangely curious. Zira turned to face him, adjusting her stance. "Are you ready, Alex?" Her voice was softer now, less clinical, but still purposeful. "I think so," he replied, his voice betraying the nerves he was feeling. "But I need to make sure we're really clear on something. This is still just research, right? We're keeping things professional." Zira smiled, though it was more of a soft acknowledgement than a true smile. "Yes, of course. I will remain focused on the study. I will not allow emotions to interfere." Alex took a deep breath and nodded. He had to remind himself that he was in control of the situation, even if it didn't always feel like it. The room fell silent for a moment as both of them gathered their thoughts. Zira looked at him, her gaze intense but not judgmental, and then gestured for him to get ready. As Alex sat there, he realized just how much he didn't know about what was about to happen. He had tried to distance himself from the personal side of things, but no amount of preparation could have prepared him for this moment. For a brief second, he glanced at Zira, wondering if she too was nervous, or if to her this was just another task to complete. "We can begin when you're ready," she said, her voice almost gentle. Alex took one last deep breath, then nodded. It was time to start. He just hoped he wouldn't regret it later. The atmosphere in the room was thick with anticipation. Alex sat across from Zira, his mind racing. He kept reminding himself that this was all part of her research, just a study, nothing more. He had agreed to help, and he would stick to his word. But as the moments passed, his nerves only grew. It felt strange to be so close to someone, especially when that someone was an alien with no emotional attachment to what was happening. Yet here he was, about to help Zira with something as personal as human breeding. Zira stood at the table, adjusting the equipment once again. The recording devices were set up to track both physical and emotional responses, but Alex was starting to feel the weight of the situation. His eyes couldn't help but drift to Zira as she moved, her graceful movements strangely hypnotic. There was a kind of confidence about her, a quiet calm that contrasted with his own nervous energy. "Are you ready, Alex?" Zira's voice broke through his thoughts. She looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly. She was waiting for him to make the next move. Alex took a deep breath. "Yeah, I think so." But even as he said it, doubt crept in. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he had no idea how to get out of this situation now. His agreement had been made, and there was no backing down. Zira nodded, as if understanding his uncertainty. "I promise you will be safe. This will only be a scientific study, nothing more." Her voice was reassuring, but it did little to calm his racing heart. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming but not unkind. She had no malice in her gaze, only pure curiosity and a desire for knowledge. Alex shifted uneasily in his seat, his palms suddenly clammy. "Okay, but if anything feels off, we stop, right?" "Of course," Zira replied. "We will proceed with caution. Your well-being is my priority." Despite her calm demeanor, Alex couldn't help but feel vulnerable. He tried to remind himself that Zira wasn't the one with the emotions in this situation. She wasn't looking for a relationship or a connection. She just wanted data. He was a subject, a participant in her research, nothing more. As the experiment began, Alex focused on keeping his emotions in check. Zira's focus was entirely on him, her eyes flickering with curiosity as she noted every change, every shift in his posture. Her scientific approach was both comforting and unsettling at the same time. She wasn't the one feeling the discomfort, the nerves, the heat building between them. He was. With every touch, every small movement, Alex felt a strange pull toward her. It was unexpected, something he hadn't anticipated. He had expected to remain distant, detached, but that wasn't what was happening. The more Zira's hands brushed against his skin, the more intense the connection became. She wasn't just studying his responses, she was causing them. Zira paused for a moment, sensing the shift. "Alex, is everything all right?" Her voice softened as she looked at him with concern, the clinical edge from earlier replaced with something else, an awareness that something had changed. Alex took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I'm fine. It's just unexpected, that's all." Zira tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "This connection. I thought it would be easy, just scientific," Alex admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I feel like I'm—" He stopped, unsure of how to put it into words. Zira's gaze softened as she stepped closer, her hand lightly touching his arm. "You are experiencing the human emotional response. This was something I had not anticipated. The act is not just biological. It is emotional, too." Alex looked up at her, his breath shallow. It wasn't just about the biology anymore. It was about something else, something that neither of them had prepared for. Zira's eyes flickered with understanding, and for a moment, Alex could see a hint of vulnerability in her. She wasn't just a scientist anymore. She was, in that moment, a being struggling with something far outside her understanding of her own biology. "I didn't expect this either," she said quietly. "I thought I could remain detached. But now, I see that I cannot. I am experiencing something, too." For the first time, Alex saw her as more than just his roommate, more than just the alien studying human biology. She was a person, struggling with the same complexities he was feeling. And in that moment, he realized this wasn't just about research anymore. The next few days were nothing like Alex had ever imagined. What had started as an awkward, purely scientific experiment between him and Zero was beginning to feel more complicated with every passing moment. The lines between research and something personal were blurring, and both of them were starting to notice it. After the last session, Alex had gone to bed feeling conflicted. His mind raced with questions he hadn't asked himself before. Was he only helping Zira out of a sense of responsibility? Or was there something more pulling him toward her, something deeper than just the research? Zira, too, seemed different. Her usual calm, collected nature was still there, but there were moments when she seemed distracted. When she looked at him, there was a warmth in her eyes, something she had never shown before. It wasn't just about the study anymore. Alex could feel it, even if they hadn't said it out loud. One evening, after a long day of work, Zira approached him in the living room. She was holding a tablet, but her attention was entirely on him. "Alex," she began, her voice softer than usual, "I've been thinking about our last session." Alex stiffened slightly. He wasn't sure how to feel about what had happened, but he knew Zira wasn't the type to back down from something once she had decided to address it. "I know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about it too. I didn't expect things to feel the way they do. It's hard to separate what's part of the research and what's just us." Zira nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Yes, I understand. I've been struggling with the same thing. My species doesn't form emotional attachments in the way humans do, so I never anticipated feeling this confusion. It's difficult for me to differentiate the scientific aspects from the emotional ones." She took a step closer, lowering the tablet in her hands. "This experiment was supposed to be straightforward, but now I realize that it's not just data I'm collecting. I'm experiencing something, too, and I don't know how to process it." Alex's heart skipped a beat as she spoke. There it was, the unspoken truth. The feelings that had been lingering between them were finally being acknowledged. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I don't know what's happening between us," Alex said, his voice shaky. "But I can't pretend like I'm not affected. There's something here, Zira. Something real." Zira's eyes softened, her usual analytical demeanor giving way to something more vulnerable. "I never wanted this to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't come here to form relationships, to feel emotions I couldn't control. But I can't ignore it anymore. I can't ignore how you make me feel." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if they were both waiting for the other to make the next move. The silence between them felt heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was a shared understanding, a realization that things were shifting in ways they hadn't planned. Finally, Alex stood up and walked over to her, his steps slow and deliberate. "I don't want to mess this up," he said, his voice low. "But I don't want to keep pretending either. We need to figure out what this is, what we are." Zira's gaze was fixed on him, her glowing eyes now filled with an emotion she couldn't hide. "We will figure it out," she said softly, her voice steady. "But we need to be honest with each other. No more hiding." As Alex closed the distance between them, he realized something. This wasn't just about scientific data or biological study anymore. It was about two people, one human, one alien, coming to terms with the unexpected emotions they were both experiencing. He reached out, his hand gently brushing against hers. "No more hiding," he agreed, his voice full of resolve. And in that moment, everything felt clear. The experiment was over. What came next was something neither of them had anticipated, but neither of them was ready to back away from it. The days after their conversation felt different. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that everything between him and Zira had changed. What had started as an uncomfortable agreement to help with an alien's research had become something more complicated, something real. He hadn't expected it, but he couldn't ignore the way his emotions had shifted, the way his heart raced whenever she was near. Zira was still as calm and logical as ever, but Alex noticed the subtle differences. The way she looked at him, the slight hesitation in her movements, the way she seemed more aware of the space between them. It was as though they had both crossed an invisible line, and neither of them knew how to step back. One evening, after a particularly quiet dinner, Zira approached Alex in the living room. She was holding her tablet, but her eyes were focused on him, not the screen. Alex's heart skipped a beat as she took a step closer. "Alex," she began, her voice soft, "I think we need to talk." Alex nodded, his stomach tightening. He had a feeling he knew what this was about. "Yeah, I think so too." Zira placed the tablet down on the coffee table and sat across from him, her posture still perfect, but there was an underlying tension in her that hadn't been there before. "I've been thinking about everything. The study, how we both feel. I don't know how to navigate this anymore." Alex swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "I feel the same way. It's getting harder to separate what's real from what's just research, and I don't want to mess things up. I don't want this to turn into something that could make things worse between us." Zira's eyes softened as she listened. "I understand. I'm not used to feeling like this. My species doesn't. We don't form emotional attachments in the way humans do. But I can't deny what's happening. I care about you, Alex, more than I ever thought I could." Alex's breath caught in his throat. Hearing her say it out loud made everything feel even more real. "I care about you too, Zira," he admitted, his voice quiet but sure. "I know this is complicated, and I don't want to hurt either of us. But I can't pretend that this isn't affecting me. It's real for me too." Zira stood up, her eyes never leaving him. There was a quiet intensity in her gaze, something that made Alex's pulse quicken. She walked toward him, her movements deliberate and graceful. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice low and almost uncertain. Alex's heart was racing. "I don't know. But I think we need to figure it out together. We can't keep pretending this isn't happening. Whatever this is, we're both in it now." Zira's gaze softened as she reached out, gently placing her hand on his. For the first time, there was no distance between them, no barrier of logic or science. It was just the two of them, standing in a space that felt both unfamiliar and undeniable. "I don't want to push you into anything, Alex," she said softly, her voice full of sincerity. "But I can't keep pretending that this isn't something real, and I want to explore it with you." Alex looked at her, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't quite put into words. He had never imagined his life would take such a turn. One minute, he was living a normal, routine life, and the next, he was tangled up in something far more complicated than he had expected. But as he looked at Zira, her soft expression and her vulnerable gaze, he realized that maybe, just maybe, it was worth exploring. "I don't want to run from it either," Alex replied, his voice steady but full of emotion. "We'll take it one step at a time, Zira, but I'm not backing down. I'm with you in this." For the first time, Zira smiled. A real smile, warm and filled with something more than just curiosity. "Thank you, Alex." They stood there, holding each other's gaze, not knowing what the future held, but knowing they were no longer just roommates or research partners. Whatever this was between them, it was something real, something that neither of them was willing to ignore. The days after their decision to move forward were filled with uncertainty, but also a new sense of connection. Alex and Zira had agreed to explore their feelings, to figure out what this growing bond between them meant. It wasn't going to be easy, and they both knew that. But for the first time, Alex felt like he wasn't just part of an experiment. He was part of something real. They spent time together, talking more openly than ever before. Zira was still her logical, composed self, but Alex could see the change in her. She was no longer just an alien studying human biology. She was someone who was trying to understand her own emotions. And through it all, Alex felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. He was exploring something new, something completely unfamiliar. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, the conversation turned serious again. The air between them felt heavier than usual, charged with the emotions they were both still learning to navigate. "Alex," Zira said, her voice soft but firm, "I've been thinking a lot about what we decided, about what we're doing. I want to make sure that we're both clear on something. I don't want you to feel pressured." Alex looked at her, his heart beating a little faster. He had a feeling he knew what she was going to say, but he wasn't sure how he felt about it. "I'm not sure where this is going," Zira continued, "but I don't want to do anything that could hurt you. I've never connected with someone like this before, and it's confusing for me. I'm not sure how to handle these feelings. I've never experienced anything like this in my species." Alex took a deep breath, his voice calm despite the emotions swirling inside him. "I feel the same way, Zira. I don't know where this is going either, but I want to find out. Together. We don't have to rush anything, but we can't ignore what's happening between us." Zira nodded slowly, her glowing eyes softening. She seemed relieved by his words, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had been so focused on the scientific side of things before, so sure of the rules she had followed in her research, but now she was learning to navigate something that didn't have clear boundaries, something that neither of them could fully explain or control. I think we're both figuring this out as we go," she said, her voice quieter now, almost as if she was saying it to herself. "But I don't want to hold back. I don't want to hide anymore." Alex felt a warmth spread through him as he looked at her, the connection between them growing stronger with each passing moment. "Neither do I, Zira," he said softly. "Neither do I." There was a long silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a pause, a moment of understanding between them. The uncertainty was still there, but so was something deeper, a shared trust that had built up over time. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't know what the future held, but they were willing to find out together. Zira reached out and took Alex's hand, her touch gentle and steady, for the first time in their strange journey together. Alex didn't feel like he was simply a participant in an experiment. He felt like he was part of something bigger, something that was both human and alien, something that neither of them could fully understand, but something that was theirs. As they sat there, hand in hand, both of them knew that they had crossed a line. They had stepped into new territory, and it was uncharted. But for the first time, that didn't scare them. It was an adventure, a beginning, not an end. The path ahead wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. They weren't walking it alone.